What's up, everyone? Welcome to our Thursday night pregame show for Week 8. Week 8, we're almost halfway there. It's kind of crazy, but I'm Tera Roberts. I'm here, and look who agreed to come back and be on the show yet again. I must have done something right. We've got Coop back. Amazing. Adam is out again. He's doing the Fantasy Alarm Show, and we certainly miss him yet again. But you've got me, and you've got Coop. That's a fantastic combo, and we will be taking your questions live in the Fantasy Alarm Discord. So just a reminder, just go into there and we'll be taking the questions from there. And we will also be previewing tonight's game between the Green Bay Packers and the Arizona Cardinals. I've said a lot. I'm out of breath because I was literally running just before this. So Coop, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah. And so just a reminder, everybody, not on the YouTube stream. Last time after this, I noticed there were a lot of questions on YouTube. Bring them over to the Discord. Okay. And I'm feeling pretty good. I'm a little worried though, that if things like this keep happening on Thursday Night Football, the NFL is going to take all the fun Thursday night games away from us, right? Last week, all the Browns injuries. This week, Devondre Adams might have been able to play if the game was on Sunday. So I don't know. If we can't behave as NFL teams, they're going to take all the fun away. It's going to be like the London games,
Exactly. Yeah. And you hate it because we had so many games that were pushed back to accommodate. So I kind of feel like they're picking on my Packers a little bit, but it's not as bad as that one time Denver last year. It was starting Kendall Hinton at quarterback. That was bad.
Brutal. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That game. They could not have set the over under low enough for that game with it was Taysom Hill against Kendall Hinton. Yeah.
Crazy,
exciting.
Crazy. So yeah, if they're not going to move that one, I guess we don't deserve it with Green Bay. So whatever, we'll deal with it. But yes, for the second week in a row, we've got one team that looks a little bit different than the other. We've got last week we had Cleveland that had Chubb and Hunt and Baker out. And then this week, Green Bay, as we mentioned, we have the COVID issue. And unfortunately, the wide receiver core is making the Detroit wide receiver core looking like the LA Rams. So look a little different, a little depleted. Yeah, I'm a kid. I'm sorry. I'm a Packers fan, so I had to pick a little bit at Detroit there. But unfortunately, we have Davante Adams that's out, and Allen Lazard is out as a close contact as well. And then I know that many of you probably were trying to snatch up Allen Lazard, only to unfortunately, literally 2 hours later, get told he's no longer usable. But on top of that, we've got MVS, who is not going to be active for this game. So we're looking at a lineup of Equanimeous St. Brown, Malik Taylor, who I don't even think is listed in the DFS for an actual option. Crazy. And then we've got Amari Rodgers as well, plus the tight ends, Robert Tonyan and Mercedes Lewis. So it's going to be very interesting to kind of talk here about what we can do with these Green Bay wide receivers and tight ends. And then on the other end, we usually keep it offensive, but this is something that does majorly affect Arizona as well. And I mean, it's one of the superstars of the league. We've got J.J. Watt, who unfortunately, again, is out for the season. That's obviously going to have an impact on Arizona's defense as well. So we've got a lot to cover. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump right into it because we have two highly competitive teams, very successful teams with some very fantasy relevant players that we can dive right into it. But before we do that, just a reminder, we will be previewing tonight's game. But in addition to that, after we do that, we will be taking questions, as Coop mentioned, live here in the Fantasy Alarm Discord and the DFS Alarm Discord as well. So make sure that you are putting them in there under the live stream Q&A section in there, because that's where we'll be looking for them and not in YouTube. So if you guys could just log into that and make sure you're asking your questions there. But before we go ahead and dive right into it, before we kick off the show, Fantasy Alarm has teamed up with Yahoo Daily Fantasy this season to offer a whole new DFS experience. And for a limited amount of time, you can get a free $25 contest entry credit after your first deposit with the promo code ALARM. And if that's not enough, how about we throw in our NFL DFS playbook? That's right, for free. You get our award-winning NFL Playbook Pro package when you sign up and deposit with Yahoo Daily Fantasy. It's such an incredible deal, and we'll be talking about this game. So, go ahead and take advantage of it because we'll be talking about players that you can plug in literally tonight. So just go ahead and go to fantasyalarm.com/Yahoo and use the promo code ALARM when you sign up and make a deposit, and then go to dfsalarm.com, wait for the pop-up, and then you will get it. You will get the NFL DFS Pro Playbook for free, all yours.
And guess what? If that's not enough, I actually just now got a message from Edward Rouse saying that we're going to run the free roll contest again. So last week we ran a free roll contest where you basically, you put in 50 cents and the loser of the contest gets $1. Like you can't lose, and the winner gets $250. So when you sign up, get all that, get access, and then you can immediately jump into a contest where you literally can't lose. So I mean, I'm not sure what else we can do, Tara. I mean,
it's fantastic.
Yeah.
So again, guys, go ahead and sign up for it because you can literally use that right now and then enroll in what Coop mentioned as well. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Before we get to the preview of the game, because we have a lot to talk about, we will go around some hot topics for the league. And boy, we may not have a lot of subjects, but we have some very impactful ones. We'll start off with obviously the big recent one, Mark Ingram to New Orleans. There's a lot to unfold here because of how it affects the running back position, not only just for Mark Ingram. Does this make him more or less fantasy relevant because he was an integral part of that Houston Texans offense, just not really something that was weekly dependable. So, how does that change if he's going over to New Orleans? How does this affect Kamara? How are we feeling about that? Why not a receiver, New Orleans? I mean, come on. Yeah, it would be nice if we had some receivers over there as well. And the impact to the Houston running backs, particularly David Johnson. So I know I said a mouthful there, but, Coop, your thoughts?
Yeah, let's start with the Saints. I mean, we already know what this looks like with Mark Ingram there because we've seen it. When they first came up, it was Mark Ingram and Adrian Peterson. Kamara was a third-round rookie. No one was really expecting him to do much. And then they traded Adrian Peterson. Kamara kind of broke out, took his role. So I think that what we're going to see here is kind of similar to what we saw with Alvin Kamara and Latavius Murray, which was never a problem, really. Because when I think about running backs and when I go through my kind of checklist of the important situations, right? High leverage situations. Who's getting first down? Who's getting third down? Who's going to get the goal line snaps? Who's going to get the 2-minute drill snaps, right? If there's a pass interference in the end zone, they're not going to send Mark Ingram down there to score, right? Yeah. It's going to be Alvin Kamara. If it's any sort of passing situation, it's going to be Alvin Kamara. So I think in the grand scheme of things, this is no different than having Tony Jones Jr. or Divine Ozigbo. I think for Kamara, if anything, you get an old friend back that's non-threatening. So I think he's going to be just fine, and then on the flip side for the Texans, they kind of had a split already. They were basically using Mark Ingram in positive game scripts, of which they were painfully few. I think the only one really was the Jaguars game, right? But Mark Ingram did really well in that game. And then the rest of the games, David Johnson's just been playing more snaps, just outright than Mark Ingram, more pass snaps. I think what happens is you see Phillip Lindsay come up and play that early down role a little bit. Lindsay's problem has always been pass blocking, so David Johnson should continue to get those pass down snaps. And then I think David Johnson does get a few more carries than he's been getting because there have been games where he's been used in a near strict James White role. You know what I mean? Like he's just getting receptions, hardly getting any carries. I think it's going to be a little better, but then again, the team is also terrible. So I wouldn't go crazy. I hope you didn't spend crazy fab on him, but there are deep leagues. Scott Fishbowl, first of all, that's a league where I'd be happy to have David Johnson.
For sure. Yeah, and even if it brings just a tiny bit more relevancy to Phillip Lindsay, I'm guessing that most of us don't have him in redraft unless it's something very deep, like you're mentioning Scott Fishbowl. But I know a lot of us are still holding on in Dynasty because what can you really do at this point? So yeah, maybe we'll get a little bit more of a positive impact. But yeah, I think it's all around just a net positive for everyone. When you look at Kamara's stats on the year and compare them to last year, I mean, the big difference that you see is that he's getting a lot more carries on the ground, and that's fantastic. But, most of us did not draft him with the thought process that he was going to be a guy that's getting, 20 plus carries on the ground and, 80 to maybe 100 if it's a really fantastic game on the ground, and then not as much work through the air. So maybe this frees him up to have to take on less of that work on the ground and get to be the Kamara that we all had last year and previous years, that guy who was getting us. We want those 10 plus target games. That's what we're looking for. And we just haven't been able to get that. With the exception of last week. So, right. If we can see more of that moving forward, it would be fantastic for everyone.
That'd be great. I mean, it's been mathematically proven. I believe it was Scott Barrett that showed that even in standard leagues, a reception is more valuable than a carry. Just because it translates, the yards per catch in general is usually higher than a yards per reception. So yards per rush, sorry. So, I mean, that's what we want, right? And just to add to your last point there, I just thought that it was funny that it's like everyone's like, oh, they brought Mark Ingram home, and then Brandon Cooks on Twitter was tweeting out like, what about me? Like,
Yeah.
bring me home. You know what I mean? Like, why? So it is surprising they didn't bring back a wide receiver, but I guess they're getting Michael Thomas back, so maybe they don't want to play that game again.
Yeah, that tweet was, I kind of chuckled a little bit, but I do feel bad for him because obviously it's not a good situation to be in. Although, we'll talk about, injuries and returnees. We do have Tyrod Taylor that's coming back, so it's be a little bit more beneficial for him because Tyrod Taylor is in fact better than Davis Mills. He was looking good before he got injured, unfortunately. So yeah, but he is one of those trade candidates where teams are apparently calling on Brandon Cooks, and it makes sense. He's one of those reliable receivers. He's someone that we could see go if the Texans are willing to part with him.
Yeah, and I'll add that when he got traded to the Texans, part of that deal, the Rams actually took a ton of that guaranteed money on. So the remainder of his contract, I believe, for this year, from this point forward, is only like $1.5 million or something like that. For a guy like that, I mean, easily. You know what I mean? That's a done deal if you can make it happen. So I imagine they're looking for picks, though, because of how valuable the contract is.
Yeah, for sure. And then, since we're talking about that, we can just go ahead and go over to potential trade candidates. Obviously, we just talked about Brandon Cooks, and the major one that we can start off with is Deshaun Watson. Legal issues aside, I don't think we have time to even remotely dive into and address all of that. But in a world where Deshaun can actually play this season, it's crazy. We've got multiple teams that are apparently, going for him, and then they're coming out and saying, no, we're not interested. But it makes sense. I mean, who's going to come out and outright say, yes, for sure, this is the guy we're talking behind closed doors about getting. But yeah, we've got a few teams that are quarterback needy or maybe quarterback greedy, perhaps, with Miami. But yeah, we've got Carolina that's now into the mix. Sam Darnold had a fantastic start to the year, and apparently that was not the true reality of what we were going to be seeing. Now, granted, we do have he's been doing this without his big guy. He's been doing it without CMC, so that does have some kind of impact to his success as well. But it hasn't been good. So, we've got Denver as well. There's several landing spots that Deshaun could go here.
Right. So I think I view the different approach, the different teams looking at him differently. Right. So I look at Brian Flores, and this seems like the seat underneath him has become so hot so quickly that he's getting desperate, which that's a scary situation, because in that situation, it's like your back's against the ropes. Matt Nagy's in a similar spot where his back's against the ropes and he's like trying to figure things out because he's the first guy gone, whereas with the Panthers, I think they like Matt Rule there. It seems like they do. And, there's no concerns about that. He's still trying to build things and he's looking for his QB of the future. So I think that's I would be more worried as a dynasty owner about Sam Darnold than I am about Tua, just because I think, Flores is kind of in a we got to win right now situation. You make a lot of promises in the offseason about winning and it doesn't happen, then, it's a little concerning. And same with the Broncos to a certain degree. I think they're still just looking for the guy that they can have forever versus, trying to, keep your job, basically, which is what, that's why the Texans got in the position they were right now is from their previous coach, just throwing things around, trading Hopkins for David Johnson, trading for Brandon Cooks, just trying to do whatever he can to win a few games, cobble a few games together and keep your job, which I think that's the worst position to be in as a team because it hurts you long term. And if it doesn't work out short term, you also kind of smoked yourself there, so.
Yeah, exactly. And then we've got some minor trade candidates as well that maybe have a little fantasy impact. We've got Evan Ingram that's apparently being called on, which, I see you're shaking your head there. That one is.
If I'll tell you, though, anybody that follows my stuff knows that Evan Ingram is not minor to me. Yeah, I'm Evan Ingram truther. I can't let it go. I am incapable of answering unbiased questions on Evan Ingram. So if you're putting a question in the chat right now about Evan Ingram, Tara's going to have to answer it because I'm just a big fan, man. The guy runs a 4.42. He's built like Demaryius Thomas. He's 6'3", 234, runs a 4.42. Demaryius Thomas was like 6'3", 229, ran a 4.41. You know what I mean? Like they're the same guy. So it's like a team could take this guy and start him at wide receiver full time the way Mike Gesicki's being used, right? Like the Packers could use this guy right now and use him at split end. Like teams could use this guy at split end. So to me, Evan Ingram is the guy that, and I could go on about it. His peers were the ones that voted him to the Pro Bowl, the peers and coaches, because the fans voted for Hawkinson and Tunyon. Like, I think this guy just needs a change of scenery, and I think this would be the best thing for him.
Yeah.
So that's a trade that I'm very interested in, and at the very least, he's going to leave there next year and go somewhere. But interested there with Marlon Mack. I'm rooting for Marlon Mack. I think we actually talked about this, where I root for guys like Marlon Mack and I'm spacing on it, but another, like the guys that have serious injuries and come back, it's just something that it just proves that we're getting better at this, and that we can, this can be a sustainable game, because the way it's going with the number of Achilles injuries we see, things like that, like it makes people hesitant to even play this game, So for the health of the game and the sake of the game, I'm rooting for Marlon Mack. I hope he lands somewhere and does really well.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then moving on from trades to big injury impacts, we've got a couple. We've got one that's a direct impact to obviously someone that we roster, we put into our lineups, and then we've got one who we're obviously not doing, but it does affect the actual talent that's around him. So we'll start off with the direct effect with Miles Sanders. Very interesting one there, because again, with these ankle injuries, the things that I've been saying with people for, whether or not they want to pick up Gainwell or Boston Scott, you have to remember that even when these coaches are coming out and saying this is not serious, they're talking about long-term season-ending injury. They're not necessarily talking about this guy won't be out for weeks, multiple. So again, we don't know exactly what the timeline is going to be, and this week is not an aggressive bye week. You can get by, but when you look at next week, this is something where these are guys that I want to jump on, and we've got guys that will immediately be making an impact because they have two very good matchups over the next few weeks. They're very usable. So, from your perspective, I know Gainwell is the big guy for most people. He's my big guy, but the big question I see from a lot of people, Boston Scott, I think I looked up maybe an hour ago, he was only 18% owned in Yahoo leagues. So people are truly not believing that he is worthy of a pickup. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head in terms of the coach speak regarding the injuries, because playoffs for them don't start for another 10 weeks. Playoffs for us in fantasy start in 7 weeks. You know what I mean? So and every game matters more to us at this point. Like when the Bills talk about Dawson Knox and they're like, oh yeah, he'll miss a little bit of time. Like to them, they're like, oh, we have a bye week and then we play the Jaguars and the Dolphins. Like to them, they're like, oh yeah, we'll bring him back whenever. But to us, we need him back now. You know what I mean? So when you can't really take those answers and boil them down, especially with an ankle where there's a million different versions of these ankle injuries, So I think we're all kind of on the same page, or at least I think a lot of us on the same page, that Kenneth Gainwell is probably the better pass catcher. He's going to be in the better role, even if it's split. So he's the guy I want first and foremost, but I'm taking a stab on Boston Scott just in case. And in these situations, I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but I would love to see just this first week, the ball goes up to Dallas Goedert and somebody just grabs him in the end zone, right? Or even better, like a Devonta Smith, 40-yard pass down the field. Because in that situation, when you get the pass interference in the end zone and you're 40 yards back, you can send anyone you want down there to score that touchdown. If it's Kenneth Gainwell, then you might have just scored big. If it's Boston Scott, then you probably are part of a timeshare, which in a lot of leagues, those guys are valuable too. But I love seeing these decision-making plays, where you finally get those answers. Like with we got it early with Washington football team, where they got into a 2-minute drill and it was J.D. McKissick and he stayed in there for the entire 2-minute drill. To me, that's a decision moment where we learn quite a bit. Some of these teams, the Saints, I didn't even see them play a real football game for 4 weeks. You know what I mean? I had no idea what was going on with that team. So I'm hoping to see some decision plays this week. But for now, Kenneth Gainwell is the guy that I trust over Boston Scott.
For sure. Yeah, and this isn't it. Obviously, if he's out for an extended period of time, we can look at this game and make a decision and hit waivers next week, because even Gainwell is still pretty available. So, which is crazy. I know we've talked, about the usability of Miles Sanders being not so awesome. But again, he just went out at the wrong time. If he had stayed healthy, he very well could have had 2 great boom games over the next couple of weeks. So, it's all about timing and it's all about opportunity. And
Right.
I think these two running backs fell into a great opportunity.
And I know, Tara, I know you with your DFS bargain mind, you're looking at these players and you're like, how are these guys not owned? Like, these guys are stars in my world, right? Because you're down there every week, you're down there scraping the bottom of the barrel. You're like, hit a Gainwell, everyone, come on.
I'm like, oh, what a juicy little buy right there.
In the lands of Chris Evans and it's like Kevin Gainwell's the king down there.
Exactly. You're doing the math there and you're like, well, I mean, 50 yards, that goal line touchdown you were talking about. You're like, okay, yeah.
You have $2,800 to spend on somebody, or $11 on Yahoo, right?
Exactly. And then the other big injury that we had is to Zach Wilson, and I don't think that really affected much. Even in Superflex, Dynasty leagues, even where on a team where I have Zach Wilson, he was not starting for me, unfortunately. I'd rather start Jared Goff. There are so many better options. But unfortunately, this does impact the receivers and the running backs. We've got Mike White, who is going to be starting this week. Again, probably not moving forward. We've got Joe Flacco that's going to come in there and probably be the guy who's going to take over just from a veteran perspective to be able to keep the team a little bit steady. But it's very interesting when you look at how this is going to affect the receivers. This week, looking at Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder, as those guys, you're probably not going to want to touch them just based off what we saw. But the impact to the running backs is going to be very interesting just because the benefit that those guys are getting, Ty Johnson and Michael Carter is the lead in general. The benefit that they're getting really isn't the work on the ground as much as the pass game. So Mike White dumping the ball off to these guys is just going to play out huge for them and make them more fantasy relevant than they have been with Zach Wilson, who's more apt to air it out.
Yeah, and I'm right there with you. And I think Joe Flacco, out of the three of them, is probably the most apt to air it out, right? Like, he's just he loves fishing for pass interference, I feel like, Flacco. But he does like to air it out, and I think that's going to, when you look at the average depth of target of some of these guys, I mean, it's pretty clear. Like, I think Jamison Crowder's average depth of target so far, I don't have it in front of me, but I'm pretty sure it's like 5 yards. Somebody can check that. I think it actually might be 5 yards flat. When you look at the top guys, I was looking at a little earlier, it's like Corey Davis, Denzel Mims, Elijah Moore. Pretty clear that whichever of those guys can be on the field is what matters. So to me, the first and foremost thing that matters is who is playing the full snap share, right? Corey Davis, they paid him all that money. They only have one tight end, so he's the split end that tethers his foot to the line on the other side. So you're going to have the tight end, split end. Those two guys are going to be out there, right? The real question is, with the flanker and slot, the two guys are going to have their foot off the line. Is Jamison Crowder going to play, the vast majority of the snaps and be the guy in two wide receiver sets like he was last week? Or do they let Denzel Mims play? Do they let Elijah Moore play? I actually saw this weekend that Mekhi Becton, who's actually on injured reserve, their big left tackle, tweeted out free Mims. Like, he's a big Denzel Mims fan. Yeah. They actually asked the coach about it, and he was like, I'm not really on Twitter, the classic coach answer. But the fact that the play, one of their star players is calling to see Denzel Mims, it doesn't go unheard.
Yeah, exactly. And then we will move on to some notable injuries before we dive into the game preview. But just a reminder, guys, very shortly here, we'll be getting to those questions in Discord. As a reminder, we're not taking them from YouTube or from Twitter. If you guys could go into the Fantasy Alarm Discord, you can enter your questions in there under the live stream Q&A section. We'll be taking them from there. Some notable injuries to just run through quickly. And a few of these guys, I had the practice reports that were coming through, and I think I got them all, but I think I might have actually missed a few now that I see Terry McLaurin on there still. But yeah, just keep an eye out for guys that are returning back to full practice. But we've got Jonnu Smith, Tevin Coleman, not really relevant, but it does affect Michael Carter and Ty Johnson. We've got T.Y. Hilton, Julio Jones, Gibson, who is probably going to play through it. That's just something we kind of have to work through. Donovan Peoples-Jones. We've got Terry McLaurin, who I think returned to practice. We've got Dak, who probably is going to play. We've got Baker Mayfield as a question mark. We've got Antonio Brown, probably not going to play. Malcolm Brown on IR, which, again, that's a big one in terms of how it affects Myles Gaskin. Odell Beckham Jr., who is not going to be having season-ending surgery. He's going to try and play through it. We've got Deebo Samuel as well, who showed up on the report. And then we talked about Zach Wilson. But the big thing is these returnees here that are coming back this week. We won't be seeing that crew of the Giants, that whole, they've got an injured crew that seems to be just moving forward at the same pace. They probably won't be back until next week, and Kittle as well. We got the reports on that. But we've got Gronk, Tyrod Taylor that we talked about, Jerry Judy, which is one that I'm super excited about, and Nick Chubb as well. From these guys, is there anyone that particularly stands out in terms of, I know we're starting Chubb no matter what. Are you feeling comfortable with Jerry Judy?
I think Jerry Judy's the most interesting one of the bunch, not just for himself, but the way he impacts everyone else.
Yeah.
Right. So we talk about, the guys that are out there in 2 wide receiver sets. I think Judy, when healthy, like Tim Patrick is the guy that comes off the field for those situations. I mean, with Albert Okwuegbunam out, you're going to see more 3 wide receiver sets anyway. But if he does come back and that's a situation, I think it's going to be Judy and Sutton. So situations where you were trying to lean on Tim Patrick probably going to become tough. And the other thing is that, one of the big things I do with my tight end research is I go through and, I've crunched the numbers, and really you want your guy to be a top 2 target on his team. That's the path to getting 100 plus targets. That's the path to having top 5 upside. Without that, you can be a back end tight end 1, but in a 10 or 12 team league, which most leagues are, if your tight end isn't top 5 or 6, you mathematically have a below average tight end. So you got to think about these situations. If you like Jerry Judy and you like Cortland Sutton, what happens to Noah Fant? It's almost like you got to pick 2 out of 3 situation, or sometimes even worse, the targets are spread so thinly amongst the 3 guys that you get none that are relevant. So I went back through and looked at all the teams that had 3 guys get 100 targets all in the same team, and it was legit less than 5% of teams over the last 5 years. And some of those teams, like the 2014 Raiders, none of them were relevant. So you have to be very careful with those situations. It could be tough for Fant, and if you're scared about that type of situation, it might be time to try and package him up and trade for a guy. If you could trade Fant plus something for a guy like Pitts, who's already had his bye week, you never have to think about tight end again. It might be worth considering. Yeah,
really good point. And I think that wraps it up for injuries and the big news and hot topics around the league. But I think we'll go ahead and jump into the game preview. We talked about it a little bit earlier because maybe I got a little excited and just wanted to dive into the Packers. But we'll go ahead and dive right into this game. And to start off, for those who might have joined a little late, just a reminder that we do have a lot of outs for the Packers in terms of their wide receiver core that we'll be talking through. Big questions to suppose. We'll start off with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers without Devontae Adams, without even, those 2-3 guys as well, having to rely on guys like, he has a fantastic connection with Randall Cobb, but now we have to see, is Equanimeous St. Brown going to be able to step up? Malik Taylor, he looked good in preseason. I liked what I saw, but he's not someone that's really been contributing. I think he's averaged 1 target a game. So, are you comfortable with starting Aaron Rodgers? And if not, are you turning towards one particular person in terms of streaming?
So I have a good amount of Aaron Rodgers, so I've actually addressed this question myself in full in multiple spots. So I can actually give you a couple guys that I have turned to and one guy that I considered that didn't. I'm glad you asked this question. In the Scott Fish Bowl, which is a 2-quarterback league, I'm starting Aaron Rodgers because, in 2-quarterback leagues, you're not going to find 15, 16, 17, 20 guys that are better, so you just get him in there. You hope that he does his thing. He's always a threat to run it in. He's just too crafty. Can't you picture him having one of those plays where he just does 7 pump fakes, 4 of them he's already way past the line of scrimmage, and then he does that thing where, the discount double check the whole deal. But, but in single quarterback leagues, I am looking at other options. In more shallow leagues, a guy that I've seen available on wires, I actually added him in a wire in one of my leagues, and I'm starting this week, is Matt Ryan. He's not owned in every league. It's I think it was 65%, something like that. This guy has thrown at least 2 touchdown passes in 5 straight games, and the last 2 games he's thrown for over 300 yards. He seems to have something's clicked with Kyle Pitts, where now it's kind of wheels up. So it's not a bad matchup for him. So I'm interested there. I mean, people were saying the Panthers defense is not a good matchup, but I looked into that too. And, when they played real teams, Dak Prescott threw 4 touchdowns. Kirk Cousins threw 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. So, I mean, even in those games, Zeke ran for 140 yards. Dalvin Cook ran for, 120 or whatever it was. So it's like in these matchups, I'm not too worried about the Panthers, to be honest.
Yeah.
If you want to go deep into the land of Terra, the Terra terrain of deep bargain players. One I am interested in is Daniel Jones, because this is a situation where right now with Rodgers, typically you would just say Rodgers. It sounds crazy, right? But he has no weapons. So, you're thinking it's not a good matchup. That's the difference, really. Daniel Jones is a guy that, he's obviously missing some weapons, but they're playing the Chiefs. The over-under is like 55 points or something crazy. He's a capable runner, and we've seen him have some boom-bust games. That's a guy that you would have to be kind of digging deep to go there, but, I'd consider it. And another one cut from the same cloth is Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater with Jerry Judy coming back, right? And not only that, but the Washington football team is the worst team against the pass. They're letting up 300 yards a game. Like, the Washington football defense cures all for your passing game. And Teddy now has 3 games in a row himself with multiple TD passes, at least 2. So it's not crazy if you really are nervous about it. I'm starting Aaron Rodgers. I trust him. I don't think, it's kind of hard to start Daniel Jones or Teddy Bridgewater, but if you are a guy, if you're in a situation where you are the favorite big time in your league and you just need somebody that you can trust a little more, then I would consider that.
Yeah. We're literally on the same wavelength. My 2 guys for this week are Matt Ryan and Daniel Jones. Again, Daniel Jones, man, when the thing about him is that it may not be pretty on the field, but he's going to get you enough to get by. Even in a game like last week where it could have been better if the game was actually more competitive. That was part of the problem as well. But I think he got like 19 points. And that's, hey, if I'm having to stream somebody, that's more than reasonable. That's getting you close to that QB1 territory. I think he was like QB 15. So, that's good from my perspective. But then again, Matt Ryan, you just spoke about it. The way that they've been lately, I think sometimes we forget that they have a new offensive coordinator. So again, that's a situation where at that beginning portion of the year, especially when you consider that a lot of those guys aren't playing in the preseason games, they're getting that chemistry together in that first few games of the season. So it's no surprise to me that they're finally getting things to click. And they also got Russell Gage back, which is fantastic as well. So they've got just a full, dependable receiving core for him to rely on. And then again, another guy that I've seen, because you mentioned reliable, Carson Wentz. Now, people have wised up and started to trust him, so he's a little more rostered than someone like Daniel Jones. But, I mean, he's very dependable. So if you want to go with a pretty safe option, that's a guy who is literally like a safety net for you.
Right. Yeah. No, 100%. I mean, and he can sling it. So it's like the problem for Carson Wentz has never been like arm strength or anything like that. You don't have to worry about him dinking and dunking. Like, that's not his problem. So I think that's a guy, if you're looking for upside, that's where you go, because he can find the end zone. He seems to like Mo Alley Cox. Mo Alley Cox is out there running 9 routes, 12 routes, catching a touchdown every game. Imagine if he ran 30 routes, he'd probably have 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, he's saving me in a 2 tight end league. Boy, he is saving me.
He's a deep cut. No.
Yes, and then we'll go to Aaron Jones as well. With these wide receivers here, there's not really a lot of options you can go with in season long. Obviously, with DFS, you can play some, you can play some interesting games. We'll talk about that later. But the big receiver here might actually be Aaron Jones. We know he's a fantastic pass catching back. We know he's not a dump off pass catching back. He's a guy that can get out there and he can be an Alvin Kamara and get out there in open field, and they might use him as a strong receiving option in this situation because he's got a lot better hands and a lot more reliability than some of these guys like your Equanimeous St. Brown. So is Aaron Jones someone that you're bumping up?
Yeah, absolutely. And you said it best, because there's 2 different kinds of running backs really in terms of what they do. There's guys that run actual real routes, like a real route tree. And even if that just includes the wheel and, the chair and the Texas, little diagonal and then over the middle route, those are real routes where you're getting downfield. You look at some of these guys, there's a handful of guys last year that had negative air yards, like as in they were behind the line of scrimmage for every pass they caught. To me, that's a back that catches passes, not a pass catching back.
Yeah.
Where Aaron Jones is a legitimate pass catching back. You can line him up out wide, and they have to actually put somebody on to cover him. You don't send the linebacker out. If he goes out wide, you don't send the linebacker out there. You got to send a corner or something real, or you're going to pay. I think teams have figured that out a little bit, but to me, like, he's going to be a huge option in this game, to the point where I wouldn't be surprised if they went a little bit more of what you see from Arizona, which is you look out there, and we laughed about this last week, where it's like all those dudes look the same. It's like they're all wearing the single digit numbers, and I'm like, they're all on the field at once. Chase Edmonds, Rondell Moore, and James Conner. I'm like, which guy is which? Until one of them catches it, because I think they're 2, 4, and 6. Those are the numbers those guys wear, which is ridiculous. But you might see a little more of that, where Aaron Jones is out there like Chase Edmonds playing slot out wide, and AJ Dillon's in the backfield, and that's not something that takes away from Aaron Jones. That actually might be a boost to Aaron Jones. So very interested to see the game that's probably going to be put on his shoulders just as much as it is on Aaron Rodgers' shoulders.
And then I'll and probably because this is a Green Bay game, like, I just made us like just talk forever before we jump into the Q&A. So I'll wrap us up quickly on the preview, and then we can do the DFS stuff, because that's pretty important. But yeah, from another perspective, we've obviously got the tight ends to consider here with Robert Tonyan, Mercedes Lewis as well. Then we've got Arizona. I mean, honestly, there's not much debate around Arizona in terms of, we do have Hopkins that's questionable, but if he's playing, you're playing him. You're obviously playing Kyler Murray, and then you've got 2 running backs that, you can feel pretty confident in against Green Bay, who does not have a fantastic run defense. Again, we mentioned earlier that J.J. Watt is out, but from a DFS perspective, I think we've got a lot of interesting ways to look at the game for tonight. Unlike last week, I think we talked about it earlier, last week with DFS, with that game, everyone was so incredibly low priced. It wasn't a matter of, let's try and work with our budget and our salaries and whatnot. You could literally include like legitimately everyone. Yeah. But this game, we've got a ton of superstars, obviously, and so we have to make some decisions. So, those high-priced players, who are you spending up on?
Yeah, so like last week we actually looked at it on Yahoo, and you could start anyone you wanted because the high-priced guys were all out. So it's like you could literally do anything you want. This week it's not like that. I tinkered around with a number of lineups, looked at the different options, and it really boils down to one thing. It boils down to you got to choose, your direction for game script. Do you choose Kyler Murray or do you choose Aaron Jones? So I don't know, Tara, what do you think? If you're going to go with one of them, you have to pick one. Which one are you going to go with? Which one are you going to spend the big bucks on? Because it's very difficult to make a reasonable lineup with both of them.
Yeah. For me, it's Aaron Jones. He's the guy I want I want him as my 1.5 points guy. We talked about it earlier. I just think that this is such a huge opportunity for him from a PPR perspective. So, that's the direction that I'm leaning. How about you?
1.5 points. Aaron Jones, 1.5 points sounds awesome. I wish I had that in my real leagues, where I do have a good amount of Aaron Jones. So, I'm doing the same thing. Like, there are ways to kind of maneuver it to maybe get that, but you have to put in garbage. I think I do have one lineup where I have like Mercedes Lewis and, it's like my best wide receiver is Christian Kirk, and I have the 2 of them in there just to try and get one, but you can't be doing it. And I don't know. I think that the only way this game is going to stay close is if Aaron Jones is good. If Aaron Jones doesn't do well, then you didn't benefit from starting Kyler Murray either, because it's probably going to be a blowout because the Packers don't have much else. So I'm going the same way, leaning on Aaron Jones hard there.
And, we mentioned some of those, those lower price guys like Mercedes Lewis. I mean, we've got, thanks to everything that's going on, we've got some definite bottom dollar receiving options and pass catching options for Green Bay in particular. So other than maybe Mercedes Lewis, is there anyone else in particular that you're looking for? Is that cheap guy that you're trying to fit into the lineup with some upside?
Yeah. So let me talk about 2 quick things here because they kind of go hand in hand. There are times where fantasy analysts can only bring you so far. Like I can only give you the info that I have, which when it comes to tight ends is quite a bit. But I can tell you, like I've told my followers, you can check my timeline. I said, look, here are the 2 sides of this coin. the last time that Devontae Adams and Alan Lazar were both out, Robert Tonyan scored 3 touchdowns. He had a monster game. It was against the Falcons. That was week 3 last year, right? But the Falcons were missing 2 safeties, and then 2 more got hurt during the game. It was not this game. So that's one side where it's like, okay, the upside is massive. On the flip side, you're playing the Cardinals, who are the number 1 defense versus the tight end. And going back to last year, they were the number 6 defense. It's all about the matchup with Isaiah Simmons, right? So that's the info that I can provide you. I can't tell you whether they're going to use Isaiah Simmons to cover Aaron Jones, whether they're going to use him to cover Robert Tonyan, whether they're going to play a lot of zone. I can't tell you that part. I can tell you that the upside is high and the floor is dangerously, disastrously low, right? Then on the flip side, which brings me to the guy that I do like playing, is that Isaiah Simmons learned how to cover from a linebacker that the Falcons brought in as a hired gun. Sorry, the Cardinals brought in as a hired gun from the Falcons. He played for them for 1 year, then he moved on to a new team. Tara, do you know who that linebacker is by any chance? He's
I don't.
the number 1 graded linebacker this year on Pro Football Focus. And he happens to play for your Green Bay Packers. His name is Devondre Campbell. And he last year was the guy they brought in to cover George Kittle, teach Isaiah Simmons how to cover. Now he's on your team, and he is a real problem for tight ends. And I'm a little concerned that Zach Ertz is going to meet him head on over the middle. So for me, the guy that I like at cheap, only $14 on Yahoo, where you should be playing, he takes up a little more, a higher percentage of your budget on DraftKings. So if you're going to build a lineup with Kirk, build it on Yahoo. He's a guy that I think is going to get a good matchup. He plays a huge chunk of the snaps as opposed to Rondale Moore, who's only playing like 30-40%. So Kirk is a guy that when I'm building my lineups, just putting him in there makes a lot more things that I want to do possible. Even potentially starting Jones and Kyler Murray. If you want to go that way, you got to be spending, doing these $14, $10 guys, So that's a guy I like.
Fantastic information. I probably would have been like, Zach Ertz. Huh. Interesting. I like it.
It's Campbell. Yeah, Campbell. He before this. The thing is, before this year, he was just one of those like they paid him $8 million to play 1 year just to cover Kittle. Yeah. But then when Simmons came up, they kind of figured out, okay, we can have this guy, we can let him go. For the Packers, he's developed into a full-fledged, all-around linebacker. I was surprised to see the numbers until I saw them because it's not a name you really hear a lot unless you scour tight end nonsense like I do. So
I like it.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, guys. We're going to jump into some Q&A. Again, go into the Fantasy Alarm Discord. If you put them in the live stream Q&A, I can get them from there. I do notice them in some other areas, so I will try and help out and go to other areas and see if I can pull the questions from there. But again, if you put them anywhere else, just try and get them over into that live stream Q&A section. All right. I will start us off with a question from Javon Sack. We've got Tonyan tonight, or Cook, Ingram, Jonnu, or Mo Alley Cox.
So, for me, I like, especially in any sort of PPR, I like Evan Ingram. He's playing against the Chiefs, which are and again, I told you that I can't be unbiased with these questions, but I truly believe that he's playing against the 5th worst defense versus the tight end, the Chiefs. They've been consistently letting up a lot of points to the tight end. The over-under is still over 50 points for this game. A bunch of wide receivers are out. And Ingram himself, over the last 3 weeks, he's 7th, exactly 7th in all 3 of these stats: routes run, targets, and receptions. For the tight end landscape we're looking at, 7 is not bad at all. Like that's what we want. Exactly. We're looking for a guy, if you're looking for a guy in PPR that can get you 4 to 6 targets, I feel like there's no question he gets that for you this week.
Yeah, completely agree. And then we've got Hopkins or Waddle, because this user is worried about Nuke's injury, and it is PPR.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I think I still have to go with Hopkins. My concern with Hopkins is that what we've been seeing is that I truly think this is a rib cartilage injury. So and I've actually had this before, and it hurts like crazy. Like if you cough, it re-aggravates it, if you do whatever. So I think what they're doing is basically using him in important situations, third downs, things like that. And then once they get a big lead, they say whatever, it's like, let's not, let's see if we can, if we can close this out without using him. But as we move through the season, I think he's going to, as he heals, he's going to be back to that guy that we believe he can be. And I think he's on the healing motion here. I have to start him over Waddle. I just can't bring myself to bench DeAndre Hopkins. How do you feel, Tara? Are you going to?
Yeah, 100%. And I love Waddle. I love the connection between Waddle and Tua. But unfortunately, I do not love the matchup. They play Buffalo, and it can be, unfortunately, pretty ugly. So, yeah, I'm definitely feeling confident with going Hopkins over Waddle. I hope Waddle has a good game. I just don't see it particularly happening this week.
Right. And it's these start sits. But if you got those two guys on your team with all the bye weeks coming up, I know that the Cardinals have a bye week the same week as the Chiefs. Like, you're going to need guys. Like, don't always, when you have two very good matchups, don't always be disappointed if you start the wrong guy. Just be happy that you have two good guys,
Exactly. Yes. And then we've got a question from Schmitty. We've got a defense question: Carolina, Philadelphia, or Seattle?
Carolina, Philadelphia, or Seattle. So you would think Carolina, but I'm scared to start them this week because of the way that the Falcons have been playing.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I'm gonna lean towards Philadelphia against the Lions, right? I mean, the Lions have been pretty bad.
Yeah. I will say that I am not afraid of Seattle. I am starting them in. Am I? Yeah, I think there's a league I'm starting them in as a little streaming option there. They're playing Jacksonville. I think it could be, as a whole, that team's going to be a sneaky little. I'm looking at Gino a little bit too. Is someone who can even do a little bit good. So yeah, I think it'll be a good matchup for that defense right there. Lots of turnovers.
Yeah, and I guess now they have it up. The over under for that Jaguars game is really low. It's like 40. So if you maybe need the upside of trying to get turnovers and stuff, maybe go Eagles, Lions. But I think that the safe play is to go the option where the least points are going to be scored, so you don't end up getting negative points. I mean, I don't see the Jaguars blowing out the Seahawks. No.
And if they're going to do it, I mean, I love Trevor, but for every 40 passes he might throw, man, there's going to be several interceptions.
Exactly. No question.
But yeah, the next question we've got here again, need 3 receivers from this group in PPR. We've got Hopkins, Ridley, Debo, and AJ Brown. It's an embarrassment of riches right there.
Can you say that one more time? Are we in the? Oh, we're okay. Hopkins, Ridley, Debo, AJ Brown. I think we might have skipped a few, so we'll have to go back and hit some of the other ones. Hopkins, Ridley, Debo, and AJ Brown. I think Debo's banged up. Is he?
He is. He's a little bit banged up. I don't think they've given any news as far as if he's leaning one way or the other, but yeah.
Yeah, I think for now you start Hopkins tonight, and then with the other ones, you have until 1:00 to see what the story is with Debo. Debo is actually going to get a tough matchup this weekend anyway. The young fella Jalen Johnson, I believe his name is, for the Bears, has actually been doing very well. Last week he had a little rough outing with Mike Evans, but Mike Evans is a big guy. I think he's going to run into a little bit of trouble with the matchup there. So as far as thinking about the injury, thinking about the matchup, Debo is probably the one that you can probably lean away from this week.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And then we've got is Cobb a good play tonight?
I gotta defer to my local Packers expert on this one. So this one's on you, Tara.
I'm good with it. I'm good with it because even if it's not now, granted, I still think that the huge recipient here is still going to be Aaron Jones, but this might be a situation where Aaron Rodgers is looking around the field at the goal line and he wants the guy he trusts. Out of that group, it's not even close. It's Randall Cobb. Cobb. So yeah, I think he could get some opportunities down there at the goal line in terms of looks from Aaron Rodgers. So yeah, hey, if you are, depending on who you've got, he can be a good play. If you may be suffering from some injuries or in a deep league, I think it's worth a shot.
Yeah, and I think that with Cobb, he's been playing mostly just slot, right? But some of these guys they're calling up don't know the playbook. They don't know how to play flanker. Cobb is probably not going to play split end. Equinemius St. Brown will probably play that tethered role. But I think that we're going to see Cobb actually venture outside a little bit more than he does typically, move around everywhere instead of just playing the slot role. So I think that he's a guy that, they've got tricks. You know what I mean? These guys played together for a long time. They'll probably be like, hey, remember that back shoulder throw I threw to you back in 2000? 16 or whatever it was, and they'll pull out some tricks on third down. That's the big thing, is that who's going to be the go-to guy on third down? It's got to be Cobb, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then we've got Lawrence or Tua. And yeah, I just said, Trevor could, he could throw all the attempts in the world and still throw several interceptions. But when we're looking at fantasy, I'm not particularly afraid of those interceptions in some situations if there's going to be an extremely high volume against a team like Seattle, who does not particularly have a good defense, versus Tua, who unfortunately is facing a juggernaut in Buffalo, where legitimately they could score 0 points. That's a reality there with such a real defense. So which one would you be leaning towards? I'd almost kind of I hate to say, like, I'm going to start Tua or Lawrence over Tua, but he just simply has the far easier matchup.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And, the odd thing that you probably wouldn't realize is that Trevor Lawrence has actually been running the ball more than Tua has. Tua's only run, maybe 3 or 4 times a game. The Bills aren't a team that you can really run against. They had, Mike Gesicki's played well, but I keep a list of these tight end assassins because I'm the tight end guy. So it's like we talked about Campbell and Isaiah Simmons. Matt Milano is a guy to know that he can be a real problem for tight ends. So if they put him on Gesicki, it could be a rough week. We saw Gesicki the first week of the season against a team that's good against the tight end, the Patriots. He had no targets, so he's not. It's not like he's not susceptible to that. But Lawrence has had 6. Last week he only ran twice, but the weeks before that, 7, 8, 6 rushes. I mean, the most Tua has had all year is 4. So it's like you're getting both sides of the upside coin, I feel, with Trevor. So I'm in on Trevor over Tua, even though Tua did have the game last week. It's a totally different beast with this Buffalo team coming off a bye week.
For sure. And then we've got a question from Boat Owner. Half point PPR, have Herbert and Mixon at running back, DJ Moore and Metcalf at wide receiver, then have Damian Harris and Amari Cooper at flex. Would you swap in Rondale Moore, Kenneth Gainwell, Myles Gaskin, or Marquez Callaway for any of these receivers?
I'll say this right now. That team, you can't bench Herbert right now. He just had 100 yards against the toughest run defense in the league. You can't bench Damian Harris right now because the Chargers aren't good against the run, really, and he was great again last week.
Exactly.
But I'll just say this, Bo Jenner. Here's what I do. I would be happy that you have that lineup you have, and your team is a wagon, and congratulations.
Yes. I mean, the only person in there is, I know that Carolina is going through some struggles, and that does affect DJ Moore. And obviously, DK Metcalf is one of those weird ones where, with Geno Smith, it's not fantastic. But again, it's a good matchup against Jacksonville. It should look a lot different than last week where there was weather concerns. It was just, kind of erase that out of your memory. And then again, he's that guy who can go out and get you an 80-yard touchdown and whatever. It's nothing to him.
Right. Yeah. No, I think he has it right down to having Amari Cooper in the flex because he plays the late game. So I think your lineup is set right where it's got to be. I'd leave it because it's just, you might be a little concerned about DJ Moore, but you can't put Rondale Moore in. You can't put Kenneth Gainwell in. So I would just, leave it the way you got it.
Yeah. And then we've got a DFS question here. We've got a screenshot. Are you seeing it, Coop, just because with it? Screenshot is easier for
I do see it.
Both seeing it. Okay, so we've got a placeholder. If you are swapping out DJ for Christian Kirk at $14, let's see.
Yeah,
what would we swap out?
He's swapping out DJ. He's talking about swapping out DJ Moore. I would keep it the way you have it. We were thinking about the showdown slate where you got to start guys from tonight. DJ Moore, this Falcons team can be thrown on. They're not a problem for that, and I think that Sam Darnold has a bit of a bounce back week. I actually kind of like Sam Darnold this week in this matchup. Yeah. So if you can afford, it looks clear that you can afford it. You're playing on Yahoo, the right platform to play on. So I wouldn't go too crazy moving it out, especially because I look at the rest of your lineup and I don't see many places where you would take that money, that $10 or $9 or whatever it is, and upgrade somewhere else. I mean, I feel like you did a good job fitting it all together. Ricky Seals-Jones, I tweeted this out earlier. So when we talk about the percentages on DraftKings, they realize he's playing all these snaps, getting all these passes. They bumped him up to 3,800, which is like almost 8% of your budget. On Yahoo, he's only 5.5% of your budget. So, like, it's a no. If you want to make a Ricky Seals-Jones lineup, it has to be on Yahoo.
Yeah, exactly.
In my tight end article, you'll see there's a few guys that are better plays on DraftKings. I'll always tell you DraftKings or Yahoo, but that is one that's clear as day,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, we talk about it every week, but that's such a good point to remember that these guys are completely different values on different sites. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So as you're making your lineup, pay close attention to that. And of course, talking about DJ Moore, he's a fantastic value this week as well with a good matchup. So I think including him does make sense. You look at that price comparison there. We've got Jamar Chase at $31. Whew, and DJ Moore at $23. Right. They were not afraid to bump that up for Jamar
Chase, yeah, man. But he's been playing so well, and he's got the Jets, so it's like, sometimes you got to have that guy in there that's just chalk,
Yep, exactly. And he's been a steal, so I guess we had to expect that at some point he was going to move on up. Moving on to the next question, we've got full point PPR, Burrow or Herbert.
Man, that's so tough because you think that Herbert is like just locked, right? But Burrow he's something crazy. Like he's thrown 2 touchdown passes in every single game this year, I think it is. And, he's coming off 400 yards and 3, but I think you still got to go. I think I still go Herbert. I mean, what do you think? Burrow against the Jets, they might just run it a lot. That might not be the shootout that we hope it is. I think the over-under for that game is, the over-under for that game is only 43 points. So they're not expecting, and the Bengals are 10-point favorites. So that game is projected to be a blowout. That's not what I really want in my DFS matchups. Like this Patriots game is a 50-point over under. I don't know. What do you think? Do you go with the same? You might want to look at your matchup and see how tough an opponent you have.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause I mean, Burrow's probably safe, right? Like, but what do you think?
I'd probably lean towards Herbert because, we do think the Jets, but at the same time, the Jets are a team that they're not particularly bad at the pass in general because you can run on them so easily. So yeah, from that perspective, it might be better to go with Herbert.
Yeah.
Then we've got need a quarterback between Kirk Cousins, Danny Dimes, and Carson Wentz.
Wow, those are like the who's who of guys that we've talked about, but that's a tough group. Man, it would be so much easier for me to pick Danny Dimes if he had more guys playing. But I think, Tara, you said earlier that those guys didn't participate today, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's going to be Slayton and Pettis again.
And he says he also has Dalvin. Oh, man.
Yeah.
What do you think? Wentz gets Tennessee. So Wentz gets Tennessee. Kirk Cousins gets Dallas. I think I like Cousins against Dallas, right? That's supposed to be a 50-something point over-under game. 53.5. I got it right here. 53.5 over-under. And it's only the Vikings were +1. Now they're -2.5. So I think you just go Cousins and Dalvin, hope for the shootout. And at the very least, you know what? Fantasy football is fun. Having people in the Sunday night game is fun. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you gotta. I look at my, when I make these decisions in a league that's $20 buy-in, $10 buy-in. Sometimes I will just say he's playing Thursday, he's playing Monday.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I typically I'm like, you wouldn't want to do that kind of quarterback with a running back, but in this situation, there are rare situations where it's okay. Like it's okay to go with a Rodgers and a Aaron Jones. In this situation, it might be okay to go with Cousins and Dalvin Cook based off pure volume. So I'm not opposed to that. I'm not. If I were choosing between the other two, I'd probably lean towards Wentz maybe. Moving on to the next question, need one wide receiver out of the group. This is an interesting one. We've got Julio, Allen Robinson, Cole Beasley, and Christian Kirk.
Julio, Allen Robinson, Cole Beasley, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
So these are the ones that you have. These are the tough ones because it's like this is why you're asking. You know what I mean? I'm not starting Cole Beasley. He's just not playing a big enough snap share for me. I think I'm going to go, and Julio Jones is injured. Julio's got the hammy. Allen Robinson's playing like garbage. I can't start Beasley, and I don't think I can't start Kirk either. I think it's got to be Julio or A-Rob. I think I would start Julio Jones.
Two pops with none of them.
Right? Yeah, that's tough. But I think I'd monitor the situation with Julio, and I'd start him if possible. That game's at 1:00, so you might be able to pivot. So you don't start Kirk. Let's see. Does anyone else play later? I think they're all at 1:00.
Yeah,
so.
I'm so wary of Julio just because of the possibility that he really is active but doesn't actually play very meaningful snaps at all. I'm not as opposed to Cole Beasley as you are. I'm cool with it. I am. Purely, again, this is a matchup situation of they're playing Miami, and oh yeah, I'm okay with thinking that literally anyone and everyone is going to be able to take on that little defense right there for Miami.
Had a great game last week. It just seems like there are spots, right, where he thrives.
Yeah.
I mean,
every other kind of guy. He's rarely someone that puts it back to back because it is situational.
Diggs is going to get Xavier Howard, right? So maybe there's room for him to sneak some in there. So yeah, Beasley's an interesting one. If Julio Jones is seeming like he's 100% fully healthy, go with him, and if not, I would pivot to Beasley. But yeah, that's a tough one.
And then we've got one more question, two more within that question, and we'll wrap things up here. We've got full PPR sit one between this group: Chase Edmonds, Joe Mixon, and Cordero Patterson.
Well, I'm definitely starting Mixon against the Jets.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we can sit our boy Cordero Patterson.
Yeah.
So gotta be Chase. Yeah, that's a Chase. I mean, he's in a split. You know what I mean? Like last week, he got a little more of everything, but it's just the problem with those splits is that it never gets to the point. And this has always been the problem with the Bills too. Is it never gets to the point where one guy just goes crazy. You know what I mean? Like if Zach Moss scores a touchdown, or if Zach Moss is doing big things, then they mix in a few carries with Singletary. And it's the same thing with Chase. Like Chase is never going to have that game where he has like 20 carries and kills it because they're always going to give James Conner a couple, right?
Exactly.
Like Mixon's not dealing with that, and Patterson's just been so explosive, So
yeah. I completely agree. If it was Chase Edmonds up against another group of running backs, I might be able to lean towards that way based off matchup. But with those two guys, you gotta sit Chase Edmonds. And then one more question from that user. We gotta sit two out of this group. We've got Metcalf, AJ Brown, Kupp, Thielen, Jamar Chase, and Devonta Smith.
Sit two. So I'm not sitting Cooper Kupp, obviously. I'm not sitting Jamar Chase. I'm actually also definitely playing Adam Thielen this week against the Cowboys. I think Trevon Diggs ends up on Justin Jefferson, which is going to kind of send things that way. So that leaves us with Devonta Smith, Metcalf, AJ Brown. I think that Devonta Smith is the guy that I'm going to sit out of that group. You have to pick one, at least two. And then I'll obviously do what I do best and hand you the hard question, Tara. And it's going to be between Metcalf and AJ Brown. So which one are you putting in?
Yeah, it's it's funny that it comes down to those two right there. It's Metcalf. Right. Unfortunately, it's going to have to be Metcalf. Again, it's a good matchup, but I trust the turnaround that AJ Brown has made right here, and I just think it's going to be so much better moving forward. So for me, he is a smash play, and unfortunately, DK, you got to sit. I hate to say that, but yeah. Wow, good Q&A right here again, guys. Thank you for joining in. As always, we love taking your questions. We really appreciate you guys watching. It's been a fantastic show. I wish we could go on a little bit longer, but we all have to watch the game. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up, and it's going to be an interesting game. It's going to be a fun game. I'm going to be a homer. I'm going to log off right now, go put on my Packers jersey, and go watch the game. The Packers versus the Cardinals. We really appreciate you guys tuning in. And tune in next week again. We've got a game. It's going to be the Jets versus the Indianapolis Colts. I'm sure we'll have fun previewing it. But again, thank you for joining in. From Tara and Coop, we appreciate you, and go enjoy the game.
Cheers.